Dear friends, I have received a lot of messages from you in my WhatsApp account as well as my email account. And the most frequently asked question is there differences between a research-based abstract and a research-based conclusion? What is the difference that exists between an abstract and a research-based conclusion? The question is there a difference between these two research-based terms, an abstract and the conclusion? The answer is absolutely yes. It is 100% difference. A research-based abstract differs greatly from a research-based conclusion. Each of these two terms have a specific message to portray and have a specific ways and modalities on how we can frame it. And therefore, when we speak of the research-based abstract and somebody is speaking of the research-based conclusion, we should not confuse them into as one terms. Each have a different meaning and have a different ways to portray. But before I go to give you how these two terms differ and they should not be used interchangeably, let me first give you a simple brief of some aspects of which they might be making you into an areas of confusing the two terms. In research, there are some terms that you can use them interchangeably. You can be speaking these words while meant on the other words. For instance, things like thesis and dissertation. Somebody can be speaking of thesis while meaning for the dissertation. And somebody may be speaking of the term dissertations meaning the thesis. Because these two terms, they are almost the same, they contain almost things, but though they are different, but their difference is not so big such that they cannot be making a difference, they cannot give the difference between them. Therefore, one can be speaking dissertation while meaning the thesis. There are some terms like somebody may be speaking of the research project, may be speaking of the project, may be speaking of the research. All this terminology can be interchangeably in use. Somebody can be speaking of the research approaches while meaning for the research types. Therefore, somebody can be speaking of the research methodologies and while meaning for the research methods, because the research methods differs from the research methodology. Though their difference is not so big, there is a thin layer in between to differentiate them. Such terminologies can be, in fact, used interchangeably between them. But when we come to the aspect of the research-based abstract and the research-based conclusions, these two terms, they cannot be used interchangeably. They are different from each other. Okay? Therefore, because at first I said I will be giving this series of video as from the first stages of researches, that is problem identifications, how can we identify the problems, to the last stages of research, that is now report writing and communications. But because most of the friends, researchers, interested personnel, they have posted a lot of questions within this week. So I find it's very important to give these clarifications, though I will make it more to the next sessions, because aspects related to research conclusions and the research abstracts are on the last stages of the research's activities. Now, take this small aspect that will help you to differentiate these two terms. When we speak of the research abstract, we are conceptualizing the summaries of the entire work of your research, as from the introduction session of your work to the conclusion part of your work. That is a research abstract. Within the research abstract, you will have a simple 2 to 3 sentences that will give a general introductions of your work. Within that particular introduction section of an abstract, you will tell us what the activities was about and what were the objective of that particular, or the aims of that particular research work. Then you will have a methodology in it. You should tell us which or what were the methods that were used to collect the data. And then what was the results that you obtained after you have conducted your research using that particular data that you used to get the results? What were the results? And then what is the conclusion you can make based on your overall observations of that particular study? And what could be your general recommendation? That is now the abstract. The abstract then, it has those sections, it has subsection inside. It has the introduction, it has the method used, it has the result obtained, and it has your general recommendations, observation, and whatever about that particular research work. That is an abstract. That the abstract gives the overall summaries of your work. The overall summaries of your work, all activity that has been investigated, has been carried out, has been done, has been performed while conducting your study should be summarized within a single paragraph, of which it could either 100 words, 200 words, 300 words, sometimes 400 to 500 words for extended ones. So an abstract is simply an overall summaries of the entire activities of your work, indicating the objectives of your study, the method you used, the result you acquired, the overall conclusion and the remark of your activities. That is the research abstract, a research-based abstract. But when we come to a research-based conclusion, this is mainly focusing on the objectives of your study. If you had 3 objectives, that objective number 1 was dealing with a certain parameters, and you have objective number 2, and you have objective number 3. Therefore, we expect at the end of your work, you will have a 3 different conclusion remark. You will give us a 3 conclusion remarks. If you had 4 objectives, therefore, we expect to see 4 different concluding remarks. You see? You can now start getting some differences. So, a research-based conclusion will normally focus on what were the objective of that particular study. Okay? You can have 3 different these paragraphs based on your 3 different objectives, concluding on what you have observed as the reason behind to the answers that you have obtained on that particular objectives. That is the conclusion. Now, suppose you were carrying out a study on issues related particularly as a disturbance on a particular city or a particular land degradation. Then your first objective was to determine the causes of this land degradation. The second objective probably was to identify the times on which there is high rate of land degradations and others. Therefore, when you have conducted your study and you came to realize that objective number 1, which was to determine the factor that causes degradation, were either human populations, grazing potential, and then whatever. But among those factors that you have identified, grazing pressure have taken the highest percentage as you compare to others. Then on your conclusion remark, that you could say now that degradation, the current study has observed that degradation of land degradation has been influenced or attributed by the higher grazing pressure. That is how you'll be now concluding. Therefore, your conclusion will be based on your objectives and the findings of your objectives. But the abstract will give the summaries of the entire work.